So, we kick things off with this guy named Shin, who's totally stuck in a deadly game where you can't log out, and it's gotten super real. He's battling his way through until he finally faces off against the big bad final boss, Gatekeeper Origin. He takes the guy down, thinking he's gonna set all the other players free, but surprise, surprise, he can't log out. He's blinded by a gate that pops open, and the next thing he knows, he wakes up 500 years later in a field. And get this, his stats have shot up. He starts thinking it's because of the title he got from defeating the boss. But chill, he's still stuck in the game and can't figure out how to log out. He even tries checking on other players, but nope, the network's dead. Feels like the game is holding him hostage, but at least he can still move around. In a panic, he starts rolling on the ground like a total loser. But then he has a light bulb moment and uses a bird item to guide him home. On his way, he spots this massive wall and a castle, wondering how the heck they got there. When he finally gets home, he finds some total creeps, harassing a young girl who refuses to spill the beans on her master. They try to grab her, but they hit a magical barrier, and then bam, this giant, ugly creature shows up. The losers freak out and run off, leaving the girl behind. The creature tries to attack her, but Shin saves the day, taking it out and leaving it as useless as a headless chicken right before she blinks her eyes open. The girl thanks him for the save and introduces herself as Tira Lucent. Shin tells her his name, and then she's like, "Hey, do you know my master? You said my name earlier," but Shin's totally lost. Tira can't believe he hasn't heard of Shni Razar, the shopkeeper of the Moon Sanctum. After thinking for a bit, Shin remembers a character named Shni, one of his support peeps. He asks Tira where her master is, but she won't spill since they just met, and those thugs were after the same info. She does say she can message her master, but it costs 1,000 jewels. Right then, Shin pulls out a gold jail coin from his magic item box, and Tira's jaw drops. How does a regular guy like him have something so valuable that only kings and a few species could use? And to her, that coin is worth at least 10 billion jewels, but for Shin, it's just a tiny currency piece in the game. Tira asks who he really is, and he just claims to be an average adventurer. She's shocked because high humans, like him, went extinct during the dusk of prosperity 500 years ago. That's right, the game's timeline is serious business now. Shin's cool with that and gives her the coin, hoping to get to know her better. Tira's never seen wealth before, so she's like, "Wait, you actually want me to have this?" But she takes it, excited to finally hold the coin she's dreamed about. Shin points out how awesome she is. Black hair, golden eyes, a stunning elf, but she brushes it off, saying it's just an illusion her master cast to hide her true self. She adds that her black hair brings bad luck, causing monsters to attack her village often, leading to her being kicked out. But hey, her master saved her and set up the barrier, keeping her safe for 100 years. Shin gets it now. Those creeps and Tira are in danger because of a curse. He asks if there's a way to break it, and she says not yet, but her master's working on it. Still, she's okay living in the barrier, as long as she doesn't bother anyone even if she can't leave. Shin wants to know if her hair has always been black. She tells him it was silver, until the curse hit her one day out of nowhere. Shin thinks about it, then checks his game window and finds the cursed gift. Basically the reason Tira's hair changed and why the monsters attacked her. He tries to lift the curse with his powers, and for a moment, just a bit of her hair goes back to silver. Tira's over the moon to see her hair change after a century. He encourages her to try exiting the barrier, promising he'll take down any monsters that pop up. She's nervous, but she goes for it, and after a long walk through the forest, she finally sees clear skies and feels the weather. Tira's all teary and grateful, and Shin's just happy he could help. She tells him her master won't be back for a bit, and asks what he's planning next. Shin says he wants to check out a nearby town to learn more about the world, and see if his other support characters are around too, since Shni exists. Tira suggests the Bayrelik Kingdom, and hands him a letter of introduction that's gonna help him dodge the inspections. He's surprised that she trusts him so much, but she feels he deserves it since he lifted her curse and seems like a good dude. A bit later, she promises to let him know when her master returns, and he heads off to Bayrelik Kingdom. When he gets there, lucky him, he skips a long line, thanks to that letter. A random guy tells Shin that the letter also acts like an id to get him an audience with the king, so he better keep it safe. The dude leads him to an adventurer's guild, and then bounces. Shin figures this is the place to gather info, so he steps in. He tells the guild attendant he wants to register as an adventurer, and she sends him where the applications are. In there, he meets this super friendly girl who looks just like the first attendant, and she's Silica. Turns out the first one is her older twin, Celica. He pays the fee, and fills out his application, which takes pretty much all day. Next thing we see, Shin's chilling in a guild restaurant waiting for his food. He notices the armor on the other customers, leather and iron, and he can tell it's way lower quality than what he remembers from the game. A bit later, the old perv Celica serves him his meal, and he's shocked to see her in the kitchen. Celica says she helps out when she can. Shin digs into his food, which actually tastes pretty good. Then she leans in and whispers that she heard he's got a letter of introduction from the Moon Sanctum. He nods, and she asks to check the authenticity, but he tells her it'll have to wait until he finishes eating. Just then, a buff guy walks in and introduces himself as Barluxheim, the guild master. In a private room, Barlux wants to check if the letter is legit. He puts another letter next to Shin's, and they light up and resonate. This proves it's the real deal. Shin tells him Tira gave him the letter, and the guild master lists lists what Tira probably forgot to mention. He explains that the letter lets you skip inspections in most countries, is accepted by all guilds, and can even score you a meeting with the king in places like Bayralik. It's a super reliable form of id and a seriously powerful item, but lots of people want to snag it for shady reasons. The guildmaster says if Shin isn't confident in protecting it, he can destroy the letter in the guild, but Shin insists he can handle it and doesn't want to let Tira down since she trusted him enough to hand it over. They wrap up with a handshake, and the guildmaster is pumped to test Shin's skills. After a rough day, Shin crashes at an inn, hoping tomorrow brings his guild card so he can level up. The next morning he wakes up, but oops, he doesn't wake up in the real world. He heads to the guild where Celica compliments his new outfit. He blushes but thinks a low-ranked adventurer shouldn't look flashy. She hands him his guild card and explains the adventurer ranks from SS and S down to G. She says he earns points to rank up after finishing jobs and can only take jobs 2 ranks higher than his own. Shin quickly shows her his first job picked from the board, harvesting hilt grass. She tells him there's huge demand for it as a potion ingredient, so no time limit. As he heads out, Celica thinks he's weird for not bragging, even though Barlux knows how skilled he is. 3 hours in, Shin wonders why he hasn't found any hilt grass yet. He thought it would be way easier. Deciding to chill since the monsters are probably weak enough to take out with his low-ranked weapons, he spots a signal on his map showing a monster moving fast. Turns out it's a level 359 Skullface Jack, armed with a light-type sword and a sturdy shield. He notices a wagon nearby and realizes there's been a rampage, though it looks off on his map. He gears up for a quick attack, but the Skullface Jack is so quick, it blocks and dodges his moves. His sword doesn't seem to do anything to the monster, so he activates his limit-off power and slashes at it. The giant monster collapses and disappears, leaving behind a gemstone while its sword ricochets into the air and flies off. Shin feels like he's just starting to figure out his strength, and maybe this game is about to get fun. Meanwhile, the light sword shatters through a castle window, sending everyone into a panic, thinking his highness is under attack. Princess Rion tells the guards to get an appraiser as soon as possible to find out what the sword is made of and figure out who sent it flying into the castle. Back with Shin, he finds a crowd around 4 injured people. He asks the same guy who showed him into the kingdom what went down. The guy explains that 12 people were attacked by a skullface in the woods, but only 4 made it out alive. It must be from the wrecked wagon he saw earlier. Witnesses claim they saw a sword fly out of the woods and smash into the castle, but thankfully, no one got hurt. The guy then asks if Shin knows anything, and he quickly says no, he was just out gathering hilt grass. The guy tells him to keep him posted if he remembers anything since his superiors are looking into it. Shin is relieved to hear no one was hurt in the castle. He swings by the guild to give his report and sees a ton of people chatting about the Skullface. He tells Celica about defeating the Skullface and snagging a gemstone. He mentions the monster was a unique one, with a massive sword that shattered his blade. Celica reacts, and Shin tries to make her blush when an elf lady walks in, telling him not to tease her colleague. The elf introduces herself as Els. Celica leans in and whispers that Shin defeated the Skullface Jack, but Els finds it hard to believe. Shin admits he didn't bring the monster along because its gear wasn't worth it. Els tells him he'd need at least a B rank or a pile of cash to snag gear from a Jack-level monster. Even if Shin doesn't seem like much of an adventurer, she takes the gemstone to see if it has the Skullface Jack's mana in it. Shin then asks if Skullfaces pop up often in the northern woods, and Els explains that undead creatures form when mana merges with the grudges of the fallen, and the northern woods are filled with savage monsters. So many folks have met their end there. He also tells them that this Skulljack is special because it's level 359. Els advises Celica to use the gems to check the monster's strength while she handles the reception desk. Once Celica is out of earshot, Els lets Shin know that if he's right about the monster's level, he's as strong as an A-rank party all on his own. Knowing she gets it, he urges her to keep it between them. Next, Shin hits the restaurant where Celica shows up this time. He asks if her twin sister, Celica, works there too, and she says yes. She brings him a drink and asks to share his table. A moment later, a tall, fit guy strides over to Shin's table and sits down right across from him, making Shin wonder who he is. Shin recognizes the guy's legendary magic spear, Venom, but the fit guy quickly introduces himself as Wilhelm Avis. He can tell that Shin's a new adventurer, since his name doesn't scare him. Shin asks what he's done to scare people, and Wilhelm explains that he's known as Wilhelm the Vampire because he hunts so many undead. Shin jokes, it's probably because of his pale skin. Everyone around starts feeling sorry for Shin since he acts like he has a death wish. Wilhelm explains the reason behind his spooky nickname, the draining ability of Venom, which sucks the life force from its victims and gives it to him. Just then, Celica arrives with their food, and they dig in. After that, Shin checks out the library to learn more about this world. He discovers the history of the Bayralift Kingdom, founded 511 years ago. He remembers Tira mentioned that the Dusk of Prosperity happened 500 years ago, so it's around that time. He keeps searching until he stumbles on a page about the people of this world, similar to the in-game races. Meanwhile, Barlux and the castle folks have a closed-door meeting to discuss the sword and the monster situation. Barlux reports that the Slayer only returned with the gemstone, which is under appraisal now. One of the castle people questions why the Slayer didn't grab the Skullface's sword or armor, and a lady chimes in that the Slayer didn't find them impressive. The guy mentions that the appraisal confirmed the gem's level is 369. Barlux suggests they stay alert for any more monsters like that in the woods. A former guy notes that the monster's level is on par with a king, and another lady adds she's already sent investigators to look into it. Barlux then warns that skullfaces come out at night, so the knights need to be extra vigilant. The guy wants to know more about the skullface's unusual gear and the identity of the one who took it down. Barlux quickly says he can only share info about the weapon, as the Slayer wanted to keep their identity under wraps. The guy insists that the strange sword flying into the castle and the skullface's defeat must be related, since it all happened on the same day. Barlux asks what kind of sword it is, and the guy urges him to keep it secret before describing the light-type sword as being legendary, comparable to, or even greater than their royal sword. This sparks curiosity about who the mysterious Slayer is. On a sunny day, Shin is just chilling on a bench, munching on some food when a little girl shows up, totally staring at him. He offers her some of his food, and she snatches it up real quick. To Shin, she looks like a tiger-type beast girl, but not like a beggar, so he wonders if she's lost. After she's done eating, she thanks him and introduces herself as Mill. He introduces himself back. Shin asks where she's headed when Wilhelm shows up, and she points at Wilhelm, saying he's there to pick her up. Both adventurers are surprised to bump into each other again. Shin asks if Mille is Wilhelm's kid, but he replies she's one of the kids from the church orphanage, and he's been tasked to find her. Just as they're about to leave, Mill runs up to Shin and whispers in his ear to save the fox in the northern woods. Later that night, Shin starts wondering why she picked him and hopes it's not a trap. And the next day, he swings by Moon Sanctum to ask Tira if she recognizes a blade he has, but she can only tell him it's an ancient sword. Shin points out it's her master's sword, Blue Moon, and says only he, Schnee, or people they designate can use it. Tira looks at the sword and freaks out, saying she's scared it'll swallow her up if she holds it. Then she admits that everything gets all confusing when he shows up. Anyway, Shin apologizes, noting that Blue Moon will help him find out if Schnee remembers him. Tira finally agrees to hold on to it. He also hands her 2 letters to help him know if she hears from Schnee. He tells her to write the recipient's name and just hit send. Tira asks why he can't just do it himself, and he sighs, saying he tried last night but it didn't work. She wonders if the cards even work, so Shin gives it a shot, and she confirms it does work, just not for Schnee. The cards depend on whether someone's met the person in this world. Tira asks if she can have some cards to study magic items for her mage ambitions. Shin offers to cover the cost of sending messages, and she's cool with it. He leaves, and the unfortunate loser starts daydreaming about what she could do with the cards. Shin heads into the northern woods, but he has no clue how to save the fox. As he gets deeper in, he hears voices yelling, "Leave, leave!" He wonders if it's a barrier, but he's built up his mental resistance, so it doesn't faze him. Still, it's a strong sign there's something up ahead, so he keeps going until he hits a shrine. The mental interference stops, and as he moves on, he hears something shatter. He's curious, but being the weirdo he is, he walks into the shrine and sees a little fox stuck in a magic circle. It looks poisoned and cursed, so he quickly picks it up and cures it. Moments later, he hears a noise and checks his map, spotting a bunch of enemies closing in. He steps out to face them, whips out his spear, and slashes them all in one go. But then he spots a couple of enemies he didn't see earlier and wonders what they are. The 2 animal statues in the shrine suddenly turn into massive monsters. Both are invaded golems, level 674. They try to attack him, but he dodges. First, he casts shadow binds to hold them still, but then they release a miasma that makes it hard for him to see. He realizes the miasma is hurting the fox. He can't pinpoint where the enemy is in the darkness, so he's stuck. Just then, the fox makes a sound, guiding him to the magic circle. From there, he can see through the mist and locate the enemies. He strikes back with his arc bind and cataclysmic strike power. After taking out the golems, the miasma lifts, and the fox starts feeling better. Shin checks the fox's stats and sees its Elemental, level 211. It's obvious the fox wants to tag along with him. Though he's never seen an invaded golem with miasma and an Elemental kitten in the game, it might be a clue on how to get back to his world. Meanwhile, Master Schnee gets a letter from Tira and wonders where she got the magical item. She checks the letter and sees Shin's name on it. Shin leaves the shrine, hoping to report back to the guild when he gets to town, but decides to keep the Elemental a secret for now. He then tames the little fox, agreeing to keep its level and species on the down low. He names it Yuzuha. A moment later, he gets a message popping up from Tira, saying she sent a message to her master and will let him know when she hears back. She also asks if it's possible to attach items to cards and send them. He tells her to say hi to Schnee for him and then heads over to the guild. When he arrives at the guild, he reports to the 2 pervy twin sisters. The clueless gals are trying super hard to get his attention, but he's not feeling their nonsense and heads straight to the board to check out other job postings. He finds a skilled successor position needed at the orphanage next to a church in the westward direction. He takes the job since it means he'll see Mill again. In no time, he arrives at the church orphanage and meets a woman, asking to see Mill about something. Mill lights up when she sees him and gives him a big hug. The woman can tell Mill really likes him, thinking he must be a good person. Shin introduces himself as an adventurer, and the woman introduces herself as Tria, the church's nun. With Tria's okay, he asks Mille if this is the little fox she mentioned, and she enthusiastically says yes. She thanks him, and Shin tells Yuzuha to thank her too. Then, Mille asks Tria to share more about her request. Tria explains they're looking for someone who inherited certain skills like Purify, so they can teach them to her. Shin wonders what she needs it for, heal or cure. He then tells Tria he can teach her, but it's up to Mill. Tria starts to talk about rewards, but Shin quickly stops her, saying he doesn't want any cash. Instead, he wants to learn about Mill's power, and asks her to share any info the church collects. Tria looks all confused for a sec, until Mille insists he's cool. Then she accepts his terms. Shin asks if anyone comes to the church, sharing interesting news, as he's especially curious about Mille's powers. Tria tells him that Mille has the title of star composer, and sometimes has unexpected visions, but they've never been wrong. She can even predict his future. Tria thinks Mille must have asked him for help because she saw something, to keep people from exploiting her powers. Tria warned her associates to be careful who they mention Mille's abilities to. She mentions Wilhelm helps them out, and that the bad guys stay away from the kids because of him. Hearing this, Shin accepts the job, and Tria tells him he'll be teaching another sister to learn the Purify skill. Shin assumes it's going to be her, but she adds their former priest has a granddaughter named Lassia, and things will go smoother if she inherits the church. All the kids in the orphanage are playing with Yuzuha while Shin and Mille sit back, watching the fun. Suddenly, one of the church sisters comes up asking if he's going to save them. Shin wonders if she means the kids or the nun, and she clarifies that the nun might get rid of the orphanage. She explains the church doesn't have a current priest, so they need someone new to take over. Shin asks why Tria can't do it, and she says it has to be someone with a special skill. Shin quickly figures out that's why they need the Purify skill. She also mentions that the greedy priest wants to shut down the orphanage because he just cares about money. Mille pipes up, telling the sister that Shin will save them, which makes her feel relieved. Shin then asks the sister if Mille is usually right, and she confirms yes. He gives Mille a little head pat, and she blushes up like crazy. Moments later, Tria walks out of the church and finds Shin napping under a tree, with all the kids piled around him. Tria's like, "Yo sis Laisha, meet Shin. She can be a little ditzy, but she's super hardworking." Shin's all, "I can teach you the Purify skill, but it's totally up to you if you can pick it up." Then he's curious if they know where a bunch of high-level undead hang out, and Tria pipes up that the Ghost Plains are the go-to spot. Just then, Wilhelm strolls in, recognizes Shin as the adventurer from that quest, and straight up asks what he's up to. Shin mentions Mille and the adventurer from the orphanage who's trying to keep things hush-hush. Tria throws in that Shin's a good dude and Mille said it's fine. Wilhelm's like, "If Mille trusts you, I guess I can too." But then he gets real serious, points his venom spear at Shin, and warns him not to pull any shady moves. They apologize for his weird vibe, and it feels like they're giving a pretty harsh review of him. Shin's like, "Laisha, you gotta take down 200 undead over level 150 while holding this prayer orb to learn Purify." Laisha's just like, "This is gonna take ages." To help her out, Shin says he'll weaken the monsters, and she can get the final hit for it to count. He mentions that prayer orbs are tough to get, but he's got one, so they're golden. Wilhelm, the tall guy, thinks Shin's cool, but still wants to keep an eye on Laisha, so he's tagging along. Shin nods, and Tria wishes, "Laisha, good luck." Fast forward, Shin and Yuzuha are strolling through the church corridor and spot Wilhelm ahead. Wilhelm's all, "Are you the chosen one?" But Shin plays dumb. He asks if it means remembering past lives, and Wilhelm's like, "Nah, just info on items and monsters." Wilhelm admits he's never seen anyone remember a past life, but is chill about it. He warns Shin to be careful who he spills the beans to, since most people haven't heard of the chosen one. Surprising everyone, Wilhelm seems to care, and Shin wonders if people are really scared of him. Wilhelm shrugs it off, saying he doesn't care what others think. He sees himself as a hero for the orphanage, but points out the kids are upset because some greedy jerks won't leave them alone. This cracks Shin up. Then, Shin gets a message from Tira saying she heard back from her master and will be back after work. She wants him to keep them posted once he leaves Bayralik, and her master has some questions about him. Suddenly, the top left corner of his map starts blinking. Important, and he clicks it, getting a letter of introduction from the Moon Sanctum. Wilhelm recognizes it and pulls out his own. They're both surprised to see they have matching letters. They bring them close, and they resonate and glow. And the next morning, Shin, Wilhelm, and Laisha head to the Ghost Plains to hunt some undead. Laisha's sweating bullets, and Shin hands her the prayer orb, telling her to hang on to it. They walk until they bump into some undead, and Shin zaps them with a single ablution spell. Then he tells Lassia to take out the biohounds. She aims her weapon at the downed undead, chants heal, and poof, they vanish. More enemies roll in, and Shin and Wilhelm go to town while Leisha heals with her magic. They keep moving until they hit a blue wall-like barrier, a guild seal. Wilhelm taps it with his guild card, and it opens up. As they step through, Wilhelm warns that the undead beyond this point are no joke, so they better be ready. Shin sees enemies on the horizon, like wrapped raptors and jumpkins. He tells Wilhelm to take the ones in front. He's got the left flank, and Yuzuha should stick with Lacia to handle anything sneaky. Lacia manages to heal a bunch, racking up levels, even though she's kind of freaked out. Meanwhile, people from the castle catch wind of the undead in the ghost plains and come a-hunting. The Skullfaces are tougher, but Lady Rihanna goes full beast mode with a sword that zooms into the castle, making things easier. The castle's elite squad struggles against a huge Skullface, but a silver-haired elf named Schnee comes in to help take it down. After they take out the monster, Schnee uses her wide heal magic to patch everyone up. They recognize her and bow in respect, and she returns the gesture. The head of the elite group reports about the recent Skullface incidents, hoping the last one they killed is the big bad. Schnee tells them she'll keep searching, and they should use their magic items if they run into more monsters. Back to our gang, the tall guy takes out a massive Skullface, and Leisha starts feeling something as she's getting ready to use her magic. Shin explains that she's meeting the requirements to learn a new skill. She gets lost in thought, thinking this is how she dies, but then she's flooded with images on how to use the Purify skill. Shin congratulates her on leveling up, and she's pumped because now they can really help the orphanage. They plan to take a quick break before heading back to Bayrelict, when suddenly they see a magical force in the sky animating the undead. This magic drains power from the monsters until they're weak and fade away, forming a gigantic monster with level 804. This bad boy looks ready to chow down on humans. They think they'll be fine since they have the seal, but the huge monster jumps and shatters the seal like it's nothing. Just then, more Skullfaces show up too. Wilhelm tells them to break through and run, but Shin reminds him the seal's toast, and he can't let these monsters roam free. And he's not about to back down, so he chants Limit off and tells Wilhelm to look after Yuzuha and Lacia. Wilhelm's blown away by Shin's power and hopes he gets the full story when they get home. Using lightning banker magic, Shin clears a path through the monsters for Wilhelm and Lacia to escape. Once they're safe, he draws his sword to fight. Yuzuha kicks it off with her foxfire to blast the enemies. The colossal monster roars, and more Skullfaces roll in. Shin's starting to think this is never-ending more just keep coming. He casts Flying Sparrow Thunderstrike, but it only takes out a tiny fraction of them while digging a pretty deep hole in the ground. He wishes Schnee was around for backup. Out of nowhere, he spots a blue marker inching closer on his map and makes a quick detour, landing near it. Turns out it's Schnee. After a moment of silence, the enemies close in, and badass Yuzuha builds a massive wall to block them. Schnee hugs her quirky master, Shin, excitedly hoping for some magic from him. Shin fumbles for words, and finally stammers he's back, and she welcomes him with tears in her eyes. But soon, Yuzuha gets fatigued, and the barrier fades. The massive monster charges at them, so they've got no choice but to fight while catching up after. Both chant Sanctuary, creating a magical light circle in the sky that wipes out the incoming enemies. Shin then swings his mighty sword and splits the giant monster in half. Just before its soul takes off, it tries to say, "Give that power to me," but Shin's like, "Yeah, right." Then he grabs its gemstone. Right after they take down that massive monster, Shin asks to have a little chat. He spills the tea on everything that went down from the moment he met Gatekeeper Origin to waking up in the field after 500 years. Shnee's relieved to hear all this. Then she drops a bombshell. The dungeon vanished into thin air, and she along with the other support characters thought it was super weird that they didn't disappear along with him, so they split up to search for him. After some seismic chaos shook the continent, she eventually made her way back to the Moon Sanctum, which brings us to now. Shin's fretting about her calling him Master in front of others since he's trying to keep his identity a secret. He suggests she just call him by his name. She thinks that's kinda hilarious, but goes with it anyway. Then she asks what his next move is, and he tells her he wants to check out this site he read about in the kingdom's library. Shnee's only poked around it quickly, and she's totally clueless about what's inside. She's curious, though if he finds a way to leave this place, will he come back for her? He promises he will. Then he quizzes her on how much she remembers from the game, and she's all, "I remember everything," meaning everything from when they first landed in this world together. According to her, she started becoming more aware during that death game period Shin and the others went through. Before that, it felt like she was just watching a movie. Basically, the other support characters knew they'd disappear once they logged out. After a deep chat about their past, they plan to throw a party once they're back at the Moon Sanctum. She then asks where he found Yuzuha. He introduces her, but tells Schnee to keep it on the down low. The moment she spots Yuzuha's 3 tails, she knows this spirit's anything but ordinary. Suddenly, Yuzuha wakes up and starts chatting with him. Crazy, right? But Yuzuha's head was clearer once the massive creature was gone. He tells Yuzuha to hush it when people are around, and asks it to merge its 3 tails into one, which it does. Schnee picks Yuzuha up, ready to give it some pets. They hug it out before making a quick exit from the forest to catch up with Shin's crew. Meanwhile, the useless buff guy is sprinting as fast as he can with Leisha on his back. Then they spot something zooming toward them at at lightning speed. They think it might be the monster's enemies coming to get them, and out of nowhere, Shin and Schnee show up, causing Wilhelm to panic a little, thinking he mistook them for enemies while Lacia takes a nap. Back at the castle, the crew's all frantic over the cracked ground, but they can't figure out what went down. Lady Rion, the clueless princess, wonders who's behind that light magical circle in the sky that healed everyone and wiped out the monsters. Gadras, one of the knights, spots Shin's epic sword stuck in the debris and rushes to tell Lady Rion. They're left wondering what kind of skills could pull off something like this. Then they notice a falcon emblem on the sword. Gadras claims he knows a blacksmith who crafts swords like this and always marks them with a falcon. He phases them on a bit about what the sword can do and drops the name, the Blacksmith, the top blacksmith around. Lady Rion's mind is blown that high humans still exist, thinking they were long gone. Gadras mentions that the blacksmith owns the Moon Sanctum, and she decides that they should pay them a visit when they head back to town. She's even itching for a duel with the blacksmith if she actually finds him. Of course, Gadras warns her not to provoke him too suddenly, claiming she's just testing her skills, but her face says she knows better. Wilhelm, being a little nosy, asks Shin about his identity and what he's been up to, especially since Schnee follows him without bowing to anyone. Just when he's about to give Schnee the credit for having taken down that huge beast, Wilhelm freaks him out with his venom spear. Shin's like, "How'd you figure that out?" Then Wilhelm spills that he could tell Shin unleashed that flashy spell and caught up to them effortlessly. After some flashy spear shenanigans, he reveals who he really is and his relationship with Schnee. The lazy bum's totally stunned by this news. Shin then asks if there are still records of high humans, and Wilhelm says all he remembers is how ridiculously overpowered and skilled Shin is. Schnee adds that others left behind some wild stories too. Anyway, Shin's all pumped to call himself a blacksmith now. He offers to help Wilhelm fix up that venom spear at a super discounted rate, but Wilhelm's hesitant since Shin looks like a dodgy merchant. Just then, the lazy Lacia wakes up and is stoked to see Shin. They introduce Schneerazar and she's totally fangirling over her. As they're leaving the ghost plains, she barely stumbles, and Shin jokes about how running like a horse probably caused it. Wilhelm then informs Shin that his job is done once Lacia picks up her skills, so if anything goes haywire at the church, it's on them. But Shin hands him a card saying to reach out if things go south, and Wilhelm's like, "I'd be desperate to use that card." More like dragging Shin into some serious drama. Shin, not having any of it, says to drag him along he can't ditch the first friend he made in Bayrelict or the kids he's trying to protect. They should just grab some popcorn and wait for his call. And just like that, everyone goes about their business. Shin and Schnee finally roll into the Moon Sanctum late at night, and they catch a whiff of something delicious. First things first, they gotta eat. Tira bursts out from the inner room and gives her master a hug. She's about to remind Schnee about the letter, but he calms her down. Tira then realizes the guy standing there is Shin, and wonders how they came together, explaining that epic backstory is gonna take ages, so they decide to eat first. Tira screams when her master tells her Shin's joining them for dinner. Schnee's kicking herself for not mentioning that Shin's the owner of the Moon Sanctum. Tira's mind is blown that the owner is a legendary high human. Shin introduced himself when they first met, but it seems she didn't take it seriously. She's scared of getting kicked out, so she hurries to apologize. Shin then introduces Yuzuha, his talking elemental buddy, and everything's blown away. Tira's mind is totally blown. Schnee whips up an incredible dinner, claiming to use the best ingredients since it's a special occasion, but she can't go into details due to time. Shin jokes that Schnee went for those high-end ingredients, but Tira's like, no one in their right mind would use that stuff, let alone cook with it. They all dig in and thank each other for the meal, stuffing their faces, while both Shin and Tira are like, we want more. After dinner, Shin gets a little worried about the other support characters and asks Schnee about them. She reassures him that they all figured it was best not to get too worried about him. Shin appreciates that they're not searching for someone who might not even be around anymore. Tira, who's hilariously drunk, starts bragging. Schnee heads to her room for some sleep, while Shin and Yuzuha find their way to their room too. Later that night, Shin wakes up to find Schnee curled up next to him in bed, and he's wide awake now. He notices tears streaming down her face and silently apologizes, wiping her face clean, even though he's got no clue why she's crying. The next day, Shin wakes up and notices Schnee isn't beside him. Then he spots some silver hair and is like, wait, what's this? He looks closer and sees Yuzuha has totally transformed into her human form. He's not sure how to handle all this, so he finds her a sweet dress made for humans in the game to wear. Schnee and Tira are both shocked to see Yuzuha like this. Schnee then gets back to setting up breakfast, and everyone thanks her after they chow down. Shin asks Yuzuha what she's doing at the shrine, and she mentions it's the least uncomfortable spot to hang out. He's curious if she knows anything about the symbols in the magical circle, but she's got no clue either. When he asks about the people who disappeared 500 years ago, she's totally in the dark. Yuzuha explains that she was just chilling outside when a natural disaster hit, and she tried to stop it but ended up hurt, so she was resting in the shrine. Just when she thought she was a goner, Shin showed up. Shin then tells her he could save her thanks to Mille, and Mille deserves some love for that, maybe a gift or something. Schnee suggests getting kafale, these awesome elven pastries made by Tira, but Shin points out they can't just operate a food shop at the Moon Sanctum. Schnee reminds him he's the only one who can unlock the armory if they want to restock, so he decides he'll whip up a few swords later to fill the inventory. Schnee tells Shin she wants him to meet this guy, Gyrart, one of his support characters, like, as soon as possible. Shin wonders how Gyrart is still alive since high beasts like him usually don't last past 150 years, but Schnee says a few days won't hurt, even though Gyrart might not have much time left. He's been waiting for Shin. She reminds him that Gyrart got all the beast tribes together to form the Farnid Beast Alliance. He's known as the first Beast King. Schnee says the current king is the 8th, super strong and leading the charge, waiting for Gyrart to show up. Shin tells Yuzuha and Schnee to get ready to roll with him, and Schnee snaps at Tira to come along this time. No more hiding at the Moon Sanctum now that Shin's back. She's a bit worried about the shop, but she's down to follow them. They need to prep, and Schnee mentions she'll report to the kingdom about the skull faces while Shin's off to the guild to make some swords and scout jobs towards Farnid to level up. He'll send her a message card about where to meet later. Schnee suggests they party up so they can use this cool voice chat thing called telepathy. She tells Tira to use this chance to register as an adventurer, and Tira heads off to change into her adventuring outfit while Schnee goes out and Shin and Yuzuha hit the forge. At the forge, Shin tells Yuzuha she can look at the weapons but can't touch them because some are cursed. He starts making swords and nails it with the next few. Tira finally gets dressed. Yuzuha changes back into her cute little fox form, and they all head over to the guild. Poor Tira is blown away by all the crowds on their way to the guild, acting like she's at an amusement park. She grabs Shin's hand like she knows where to go, but Shin reminds her he's the one leading the way. At the guild, Shin ranks up to rank E and is shocked since he hasn't even completed a job yet. Celica tells him he took down a high-ranking skullface and a surprise horde of them, which the guild verified, so they've decided to promote him. She then asks if Tira is his girlfriend, since they were holding hands like a couple, but Shin quickly clarifies they're just traveling together for business, and that he thought she'd register as an adventurer to get a guild card. Celica tries to keep chatting, but Shin cuts her off. Then he asks if she has any info on sites from the Dusk of Prosperity. Celica says she can't leak that to anyone below rank B. Shin agrees to check back later when he's leveled up and asks if there's any job he could take on the way to Farnid. She checks her records and spots a request for a wagon to Bayrion's staging post. She says they're leaving this afternoon when the bell rings twice, and 2 other adventurers have already signed up, so he should meet them. It'll take a bit for Tira's guild card to be ready, and Shin doesn't need to meet the other 2 adventurers until the afternoon, so they decide to wander around town and head to the church. While wandering, they come across Leisha cleaning up in the church. The 2 ladies introduce themselves, and when Schnee's name comes up, Leisha starts firing off questions like crazy. Who's gonna answer all that? Mille's over the moon to see Shin and Yuzuha again. She always feels like they shouldn't leave her behind. Leisha happily tells Shin she'll be the next head of the church. Tria adds that the kids are super happy too, but they're not sure how to repay him. Shin's flattered and asks about Wilhelm, and Leisha says he's out checking on other priests. No one really knows why that greedy pig wants to take over the church. Then, he gives them all sorts of stuff enchanted with magic, including some for Mill. Suddenly, a bunch of kids rush in and tackle Shin, begging him to stay and play. Next thing you know, they're all over Tira and she starts screaming. Just a wild scene. After they step out of the church, Leisha apologizes to Tira for the kids being a handful. Tira just says she's never really played with kids, but they were cute and sweet. Next, they head back to the guild to grab Tira's guild card and then swing by the Moon Sanctum. Shin's surprised she hasn't forgotten about picking up the house, but she thinks it's super weird to carry a house around in the first place. To Shin, it's totally normal since he owns it. In a quiet spot on the road, he pulls out a beautifully crafted crystal and claims it's enchanted with the teleport spell. He tells her they can use it to get to the Moon Sanctum. Tira thinks he's amazing, and he casually mentions he made the crystal himself. They use it to teleport to the Moon Sanctum, and then he chants storage to turn the house into a ring-like thing in transport mode. It looks like they've wrapped up their errands, so they head off to do the job. As they reach the spot, they instantly recognize Nak's wagon. Shin and Tira introduce themselves to the first adventurer, who calls himself Gaian, while the other red-haired guy goes by Tsubaki. Just then, a man shows up introducing himself as Nak the merchant, and they're ready to roll. Back at the kingdom, the knights report to your majesty about the Moon Sanctum's disappearance. Everyone knows it's an unbreakable structure that survived the Dusk of Prosperity. The Moon Sanctum is a mystical shop built from lost tech, so if it's gone, it's a major problem for the Bayrelict kingdom. They also mention Schnee is on her way to the castle. Lady Rion's sister is worried about her sister not returning, and they don't have enough info to act just yet, so she suggests they wait for Miss Alamedi Schnee to arrive, and your majesty agrees. On their way to Bayrayon through the forest, Shin tells Tira that if you're doing escort jobs, you gotta be capable and confident because bandits are way more likely to attack than monsters. So, they decide to reintroduce themselves. Gaian is an A-rank samurai, and he seems a bit useless when it comes to magic. Tsubaki's a boxer at E rank who can use support spells to speed things up. Tira's an alchemist at G rank, so super fresh, and she can use a bow, a sword, and cast healing spells. Shin's also a samurai, same rank as Tsubaki, and he can use a little fire and lightning lightning magic. Oh, and let's not forget Yuzuha, Shin's little monster. Both Gaien and Tsubaki are impressed that Shin can be a samurai and still use spells. Plus, he's kinda got a monster buddy, which is cool. Tsubaki guesses Shin's from Hinamoto since most samurais come from there. Hinamoto is this unique island nation that popped up from a natural disaster and has a ton of samurai and shinobi guilds. Shin asks about the guilds around there, and Gaien lists a few like Kasho Fugetsu, Majin Keppuroku, and Kuromiko Jinja, which are all from the game. Then, out of nowhere, some bandits stop their wagon and threaten to kill them if they don't hand over their cash and cargo. Nox shaking like a leaf, so Shin tells him to hop into the wagon, and Yuzuha steps up to protect him. The bandits are all like, "We won't get excited until we hear screaming." They even underestimate little Tsubaki. Gaien shows off his sword, trying to intimidate them into backing off, but the bandits aren't budging. They know who they are. Shin and the squad are totally caught off guard that these bandits know their ranks. Tira spots some bandits hiding behind trees, and she doesn't hold back, shooting arrows at them. This gets the bandits riled up, and bam, they're in a skirmish. Tsubaki kicks things off with a flashing vigor, taking down the mouthy bandit in a single hit. Gaien slashes at another, and Shin joins in to help take out his share of bandits. The bandit leader can't believe these guys are so powerful, despite being E rank or lower. With him as the last one standing, he tries bluffing with his magical sword, but Shin walks right up and chops it in half, then goes to town on the guy, tying him up afterward. Tira sees Shin's rage and bloodlust and quickly hugs him to calm him down. Everyone's confused about her actions, and she reminisces about how her master used to comfort her with the same hug. Gaien shares that the bandits thought they'd hit the jackpot with goods linked to the church, without even knowing what to take. All they wanted was to kill some adventurers and snag their stuff. Shin remembers Triya telling him they need official permission from Church HQ to name the next head, so he wonders if someone's trying to mess things up, but he thinks escorting this wagon is definitely the way to go. They finally roll into Beirayun, and Nak thanks them and gives them completion certificates they can use at the guild. Then, they head to report in. After, Gaien and Tsubaki head to Kilmont while Shin and Tira are off to Farnid. Since Farnid's pretty far, Shin suggests grabbing a wagon. When they hit the wagon shop, they see all the wagons look the same, so Shin thinks it'd be better to modify one to reduce shaking and make the ride smoother. Sounds kinda flashy, but in a good way. Then, they search for a comfy large one that has room to sleep and stash their gear for when Schnee shows up. The seller recommends getting some sturdy horses to pull the wagon. Shin mentions how he's heard of people using monsters instead, and the seller goes, "Yeah, some do that cause they're stronger, but you've gotta tame one first." So they walk out of the shop. In the next scene, Shin's considering having Yuzuha transform if things get crazy when he gets a telepathic call from Schnee. She says she's wrapped up her business in the kingdom. Shin tells her they just bought a wagon, but need to find some horses to head to Farnid. Schnee says she'll snag a monster to pull the wagon. Then she mentions the kingdom's worried about the moon sanctum disappearing. She'll be at Beirayun in a day, but he'll need to wait for her. He assures her he'll let her know when they find an inn. Then he tells Tira to enjoy exploring while they look for a place to stay. A random woman points them to a nice inn, but they drop almost half their reward there. Shin's worried about the expense, but Tira reassures him the lady probably thought adventurers could handle it. Once they get to their rooms, Yuzuha immediately flops on the bed and transforms into her human form. Shin decides it's a good time to maintain his sword. Tira pops in to ask if he's told her master they're staying in the city. He lets her know they'll meet here, but he can't say when. A little later, they have dinner in their room, and Shin heads off to grab a quick bath. Unfortunately for him, Yuzuha and Tira beat him to it, so he sticks with working on his gear, but they start being goofy and bothering him, so he moves further away from the bathroom. The next morning, Shin goes to work on the wagon while Shnee's still on her way, and Tira's interested in watching him modify things. To her surprise, Shin tweaks the wheel to stop the shaking in less than a minute. He decides to install the bearings in a way that keeps them low-key. Right then, Schnee calls Shin to let him know she's arrived at the woods beyond the north gate, and he says they'll head there as soon as possible. Shin hurries to wrap things up in the wagon shop, and they take off to meet Schnee. When they reach the woods, they find a massive monster named Grufazio Jade, level 751, all captured by Schnee. Curious, Shin asks where she got it, and she replies she found it on the nearby mountain. Shin praises her, but it's clear she gets a little flustered around him. The monster gets all cuddly with Tira, nudging her cheek with its nose. Then, Shin asks Schnee why she chose this monster, and she explains that it's gotta be a beast to pull his wagon. Shin's worried it's way too big for their little wagon, but Schnee, knowing her odd boss, is ready for this. She controls the monster to shrink down to a size that fits the wagon. Tira's so freaked out that she faints. Seriously, both Shin and Schnee act like this is totally normal. Honestly, even Shin didn't expect her to bring something so high level, but he's stoked to have a cool beast pulling their ride. The monster makes a sound, and Yuzuha translates it as, "We're good to go." Awesome. Both monsters can chat with each other. Schnee tells them the monster's name is Shimmer, and it can use illusion and thunder skills. Then she reminds Shimmer to keep things cool around her master. Shin gets Shimmer hitched up to their wagon, and off they go, heading to see an old friend, Gyrart, in Farned. No matter how much Shin tries to blend in, they still turn heads wherever they go. But hey, at least the wagon's not bouncing all over the place. It's smoother than even a royal carriage. In short, they all love it. However, Yuzuha shares that Shimmer and his mom used to rule the mountain together until an adventurer took her out, leaving only Shimmer. An elf rescued him, and he worked hard to get stronger enough to return to the mountain. After hearing this, Schnee realizes that's why Shimmer wasn't cautious around her. Shimmer kinda hints that he followed her because she smelled familiar, which leads to the realization that it was Tira's scent. Turns out, Tira rescued a puppy when she was younger too. Because of that, Schnee dissolves her contract with Shimmer and tells Tira to make a new one. Tira forms a contract with Shimmer and immediately feels weak, so Shin swoops in to help her rest a bit. At night, they find a cozy spot to crash and start a fire to keep warm. Schnee tells Shin she let Tira have Shimmer so he can look out for her when they can't be around. It'll give her peace of mind knowing Shimmer's there when she's making her choices. Plus, Tira can call him whenever she needs him, so they've got her covered. Schnee then assures Shin that she'll always have his back whenever he gets into a jam. Shin feels a wave of relief and admits she's the one he turns to when he's totally messed up. The next morning, they bump into two high-ranking folks at southeastern Farned, right at the edge of Ralua Forest. Schnee confirms she sent a message to Gyrart, so these peeps are here to meet them. The two bow and say they've come on the first king's orders. Schnee asks them to take them to Gyrart. Shin uses his power to hold onto the wagon, while Shimmer shrinks down to the size of a local dog. As they lead the way to the mansion, Schnee tells Shin that these two are Gyrart's grandkids. Once they meet up with Gyrart, he greets Shin as master and expresses his shock at seeing him again in this life. Shin, in turn, thought Gyrart was a goner too. Before jumping into business, Gyrart introduces the current Beast King, Wolfgang, and his daughter, Kore, along with his two trusted allies, Vanku and Rajimdol. Shin introduces himself as Shin, a high human, and they agree to keep things casual, even though Gyrart can't resist throwing in some sarcasm by calling Shin master, which is kinda out of character for him. Gyrart claims it's the only way to put his crew at ease, since high humans are seen as legendary beings to be both feared and revered around these parts. They reminisce about the last time they took down some huge monsters together, sharing a laugh. Gyrart's eager to brag about starting a nation, but Schnee already spilled the beans so much for that surprise. She figures it's better to keep it real instead of letting Gyrart exaggerate. Next, she brews some tea to keep the convo going. Shin shares what he told Schnee with Gyrart, who admits he was looking for him too, but just couldn't reach him. Before Shin can say much, Gyrart abruptly drops the bomb that he's going to die soon, like, he's got less than a month left. Shin's all, wait, how do you know this? And Gyrart explains he's felt something was off for weeks, but he was sure after Schnee filled him in. Then, Gyrart challenges Shin to a duel because he wants to go out fighting against the strongest warrior. Shin's mind is basically blown. He wonders if Gyrart wants to die in battle, but Gyrart can't help wishing for it, so Shin accepts. Gyrart mentions he's told his crew about his life expectancy, but hasn't broken the news on the duel yet. He adds that his two loyal allies have fought alongside him since Shin disappeared, and they're all getting older, including himself. Gyrart praises Wolfgang as an amazing leader, one who listens to the people and walks alongside them. He thinks Wolfgang will make a great replacement for him, though his only regret is never having a duel with Shin. Later that night, Gyrart informs his crew that he's found a spot to meet his end, and insists on dueling Shin before he checks out. The duel's set for a week from now. Kore's freaking out about it, wondering if everyone's just gonna stand by and watch their master talk about this. Gyrart reassures her he's lived a long life and she'll understand why in a week. She reluctantly agrees to her master's wish, and Gyrart announces they'll fight in Ralua Forest his final showdown, and he wants them all to witness it. The next day, Shin helps Gyrart fix up his hand shield weapon in the blacksmith room at the Moon Sanctum. Gyrart feels like he's turned back the clock. He asks Shin if he'd go back to his world if he finds a way home, leaving Schnee behind. Shin thinks for a moment and replies yes, that's why he's been fighting. This surprises Gyrart, but hey, what can he do? Nothing. Shin wishes everything could be sorted in one go for him and Schnee, but the harsh reality is it's not guaranteed you get what you wish for. Gyrart says he's looking forward to the fight day. When the day arrives, Gyrart is all fired up and ready for the duel. They make their way to Ralua Forest using Shin's wagon, and even his crew hasn't seen him. This pumped in ages. Once they arrive, Schnee encourages Shin to give it his all, and not to stress about anything. She bows and tells him she's counting on him to take care of Gyrart. Wolfgang and Kor promise to remember Gyrart's teachings from the first king. The match kicks off with some warm-ups, triggering memories from their battles 500 years ago, though it feels intense like the world might end. Gyrart transforms into a massive single fang, remembering Shin mentioned not to rely on his final boss powers because it wouldn't be fair. But he still wants to put forth his best effort, since this may be the only time he can match Shin's strength. Shin goes in with the first strike, but Gyrart dodges and repositions himself behind Shin, thinking he's slow. Shin blocks the hit with his sword. Overpowered. Gyrart channels a ton of energy and throws an attack at Shin, but Shin struggles to stop it. He sneakily appears to hit Shin from behind, but Shin manages to evade again. Gyrart begins chaining his skills, but nothing can slip past Shin's sword. Finally, Shin decides to unleash all his power, striking with haze just as Gyrart counters with legendary excellence. Their massive hits collide, shattering Shin's sword into pieces while leaving just a scratch on Gyrat's fang. In the end, Gyrart lands a solid blow on Shin before collapsing and reverting back to his human form. Shin's impressed with Gyrart's strategy and how he pulled it off. Gyrart claims he didn't live for 500 years for nothing, and his long-sought wish has been fulfilled. He then asks Shin for a favor as a reward for hitting him, and Shin happily obliges, ending with Gyrart passing away. Shin returns with Gyrart's body, telling his crew that their king managed to hit him a high human. That means Gyrart has ascended to Shin's level, and his loyal allies feel content, knowing he seems satisfied even in death. The entire nation mourns the first king's passing, while his crew throws him a phenomenal funeral. That night, Shni finds her master sitting alone outside, gazing at the stars, and she rushes to embrace him. She comforts him and asks if there's anything she can do to help. The tears streaming down his face, he admits he knew this was what Gyrart wanted, but it's still painful to lose a friend. Shni reassures him he's done his duty and it's okay to feel sad. Next up, they visit Schweid, the High Dragnir and one of Shin's former allies. Shni and Tira rock some cosplay gear items Shin made to disguise their species traits as they blend in with the locals. Honestly, they look so good that I'd probably marry one of them if I were there. They make their way to where different nation representatives hang out to find Schweid. Wolfgang and Kor are guiding them inside. On their way, Shin asks Schnee if Schweid is a monarch like Gyrart. She replies no. He was the first emperor of the Dragon Empire, Kilmont, but he cut ties with the royal family. She explains Schweid's just been chilling ever since Kilmont stabilized. Once they get to a room, the guard shows them to their seats and goes to fetch Lord Schweid. Wolfgang heads off, claiming he has a meeting to attend, but tells them to reach out to Kor if they need anything. Moments later, Lord Schweid shows up and bows to his master, Shin, all excited to see him and ready to serve again. But honestly, his body's saying something different. Shin tells him to chill out because he's about to share everything he told Shni, and she nods in confirmation. Even though Schweid can't wrap his head around why Shni calls him by his first name, he's super relaxed. The first thing Schweid notices is Shni's outfit and asks her why she's dressed like that. She says it's to match Shin's style. They all have a good laugh, and then Shin spills the tea about his death. He's sad about it, but at least he died like a true warrior. Then Schweid hits him with the question, what's next? Shin says he's combed through all the libraries here, so he's thinking about heading to the place next. Schweid mentions he's returning to Kilmont but wants to tag along afterward. It's been ages since they teamed up. He suggests using telepathy to keep in touch. Before Schweid takes off, he hands Shin his weapon, Nagizuki. It's been forever since he held it, but it feels so right in his hands. Shin says he took care of it, and even Schweid can tell it feels way more powerful than the Nagizuki he remembers. Shin's mana control has leveled up since he fixed Gyrart's stuff, so it's now 5 times stronger. Everyone's blown away by it. At the guild, Shin wants to bump his adventurer rank to around C, so he picks goblin slaying as his next gig. Kor asks if she can join, and Shin's like, sure. She says she'll finish her other work later. She's checking out the Ralua forest, where that duel went down, to make sure it's healing up right. The place looks like a tornado threw a dance party and forgot to clean up. Shin wants to come along since he was part of the duel, and she's all for it. First, they're off to hunt goblins, then they'll check out the Ralua forest. Awesome. The forest is back to normal. Kor says they need to inspect the regrown trees and look for anything weird. She tells them to grab any unusual herbs while they're at it. At the end of the day, they head back to the guild to report on their findings. The guild attendant hands Shin a letter from Barlux, the guild master of the Bayrelicht branch. The letter urges him to head to Bayrelicht as soon as possible, near the palace. He's wondering why they want him there, and figures it's about that crazy Skullface Jack's sword that crashed into the castle. Time to deal with that before he thinks about leveling up. Both Shni and Tira decide to join him, but Kore can't leave her country. Then, he asks to see Wolfgang to give him Gyrart's Death Moon, that handfang weapon, before he heads to Bayrelicht. He mentions it's changed owners, so Wolfgang can pass it on to whoever he likes. Wolfgang, puzzled, wonders how Shin got it since he thought they were destroyed in the duel. Shin tells him, I made it, so fixing it's no biggie, but he admits Gyrart asked him to hand it over once the duel ended. He tries it out, and it feels perfect in his grip, so Wolfgang accepts the responsibility. Instead of taking a wagon that would take forever, he uses his crystal item to teleport them to a new spot. He checks his map and sees someone's watching them, but he activates his stealth skill. Maybe they think the Moon Sanctum's gonna pop up right here, but they forgot it can move. Speaking of the Moon Sanctum, Shni gets jittery that Shin might vanish again, but she quickly plays it cool when Shin glances her way. They leave Shin behind, and he reminds them that he's the one Barlux summoned. They arrive at the Bayrelict Guild, where he reports to the two clown twin sisters about the letter from the guildmaster. Celica gets up to go fetch the guildmaster. Shin asks Celica what's up, and she says she doesn't know much, but she figured he'd be summoned soon since he's not your average adventurer. Celica jokes about him always hanging out with women, and Shin defends himself saying he has guy friends too. He brings up Wilhelm, and everyone in the guild goes silent like they just walked into a funeral. Celica mentions that Wilhelm doesn't form parties often and has a lot of rumors swirling around, making him tough to approach, but Shin knows Wilhelm's the real deal. A bit later, Celica comes back and leads Shin to the guildmaster. He meets Barlux and Arid Royal, the mage who assesses gems for the guild. Barlux tells Shin that Arid checked out the skull-face gem from last time, so Shin asks why he got summoned here. Instead of diving into that, Arid asks if Shin knows about the sword that made a crash landing in the castle. Shin plays along like he's just as clueless. Arid explains that this massive sword plowed into the second princess of Bayrelict's room, but luckily, no one got hurt. He adds that the sword's elemental enchantment and base materials are top-notch, almost on par with the king's royal sword. The gem from the skullface Shin defeated had some serious mana power. It was a high-level gem, so Shin's like, "How'd you figure out I was involved?" Arad, doing his appraiser duty, explains that they asked him to check out the sword, and the mana traces on it matched the mana from the gem. They followed the trail back to Shin, which is why he was summoned. Given the situation, they couldn't keep it under wraps, and neither could Barlux. Barlux points out that things could be worse if he didn't have a letter of introduction from the Moon Sanctum. Getting down to business, Barlux informs him that it's the second princess, Lady Rione, who summoned him. Shin's thinking she's going to hold him accountable for nearly taking out royalty, but Barlux reassures him he won't be punished, since Lady Rion's fought skullfaces before, and totally gets that Shin had to go all out against it. Shin fills Schnee and Tira in on his meeting with Barlux and Arad. Schnee suggests they might aggressively recruit him or set him up to marry some noble. That idea keeps Shin from wanting to go back, but Schnee says if they want him to join them, he can just turn them down since they'd be losing out big time if he ditched his crew. She jokes that he can just tell them she's his fiancée, or maybe say he's engaged to Tira if marriage comes up. Yuzuha, switching to her human form, shouts that she'll be Shin's fiancée, and then things get silly. The next day, Shin puts on a red uniform and heads to the palace. When he gets there, the guard informs Gadras. Gadras shows up to take him into the palace. Shin notices Gadras's stats level 188, talk about powerhouse, but he makes it to the princess's room. She thanks him for coming and introduces herself as Rione Citrail Bayrelict, the second princess of the kingdom. Shin bows and introduces himself as the adventurer, but she's all about keeping it casual and says to just call her Rione. Without beating around the bush, Shin asks why he was summoned. She tells him it's about the skullface. She pulls out the sword from a safe and asks if he recognizes it. Shin nods, saying it's the sword that Skullface was swinging around. Then she spills the tea that adventurers like him who suddenly make a name for themselves are seen as special. They summon folks when they realize they're powerful, although some use the chance for some shady stuff. But Rione gets a vibe that Shin's not one of those guys. She claims to have killer intuition skills that never miss. The big deal is that he has a letter of introduction from the Moon Sanctum, and the palace knows that Schnee wouldn't give one to anyone shady. Once she mentions they need to get to business, Shin starts to sweat, thinking she'll drop marriage talk, but she surprises him by wanting him to fight her. Gadras thinks Lady Rione, the so-called useless princess, is being way too straightforward, so he suggests they talk about Shin joining their crew first, but she's super eager to check out Shin's skills. Gadras wants her to stick to the proper process, but she's not having any of that. She grabs the box that had Skullface's sword and tells Shin to follow her. They head to a teleportation point, and Shin's curious why they need to teleport. She shoots back that they're going to a spot where they can throw down all out. They teleport to a training arena where chosen ones battle it out. Shin asks about the place, and she admits she's clueless about its other uses. She mentions that these teleportation points are ancient tech from before the dusk of prosperity, and no one really understands them now. Shin finds it weird that they have teleportation when it's supposedly lost magic. Whatever, they grab their weapons and get ready to rumble. Right before the fight kicks off, she tells him this battle is to test his skills, and she wants him to work up a sweat. Gadras starts the duel, and they both go in swinging, but their swords clash. She drops her sword and tries to kick him, but Shin's quick on his feet and dodges it. He can read her stats, so he adjusts his to match hers. Then he attacks, and they end up locked in another blade clash. It turns into a strength contest. She gives them the green light to use skills if they want to. They both unleash the flashing vigor skill, but Gadras struggles to see any obvious difference. She tries to strike again, but Shin sidesteps just in time, and her sword slams into the ground. He realizes he would have been toast if he hadn't dodged. Turns out they're pretty evenly matched in skills and speed. Gadras praises Shin, seeing him as equal to the princess. He points out her sword's been taking a beating. Given the situation, Shin proposes they chill and end the fight since they're both dodging defeat like pros. Then she hits him with, "So, how about you join us and serve the kingdom?" She promises him a decent spot, not a general's role or anything, but Shin declines, wanting the free life of an adventurer adventurer. He's not the genie she's hoping for. She tells him to give a shout if he changes his mind. Shin's curious about why she has Skullface's sword. She explains that in her kingdom, giving a sword to a woman when proposing is tradition, and if the guy's unfaithful, she'll use that sword to take him down. Shin finds that kind of creepy. She suggests she'd like to think of Skullface's sword as a gift from him. He quickly backpedals, claiming it was just a fluke that the sword ended up flying. She agrees not to push it. Gadras warns that there are folks scheming to turn this whole incident against Shin and throw him behind bars to earn his keep for the kingdom. Lady Riane suggests treating it like a tribute instead. Shin's into that idea instead of a marriage proposal because it gives Lady Riane a powerful weapon without the awkwardness. She adds that Shin would be off the kingdom's radar, although Gadras thinks that's weird. Lady Riane offers to pay Shin for the blade from her own stash. Knowing they both stand to gain from this deal, she begs him to let her keep the sword. Shin, wanting to stay on his adventurer grind, says she can keep it and he doesn't need cash either. He just wants access to the magical library's restricted zones. Lady Rione wonders why this lowlife isn't impressed by such a valuable sword that could make him live like a king for life. She admits she's used it a few times, and it feels good in her grip. They teleport back to the castle and find two guards lying on the ground like they've been cooked alive. Then they see Cardinal Greril, a kingdom priest, and they're like, "What's he doing here?" Shin checks his status screen and realizes the guy's all messed up with charm and confusion. Gadras gets ready to confront Cardinal Greril, but then Shin and Lady Rione get unexpectedly teleported. Gadras manages to grab a hold of Cardinal Greril and alerts the king, who orders the priest to be locked up in the dungeon. But things go sideways. They end up in some rundown, unfinished place. Shin asks where they are, and Lady Rione recognizes it as the land, Kalkia. It looks straight out of a horror movie, and they're clearly alone there. Lady Rione wonders what could drive such a powerful priest like Cardinal Greril to lose it. Shin focuses on getting out of there, and asks if she can use telepathy. She says no since they're not in a party. So, Shin decides to reach out to his buddies, Schnee and Tira, to figure out where to meet up. He asks Lady Rione about any nearby cities, and she mentions Valmer, the only walled city to pass through when heading in or out of Baerlicht. Luckily, Schnee's call comes in at just the right moment, and she sounds shaky and worried about Shin, but he reassures her he's okay. She's stressing about him disappearing again. He fills her in on their situation, and they both think someone's got a grip on Cardinal Greril's mind. Schnee mentions that mind-affecting skills are taboo, and anyone, even royals, caught using them gets executed. If that's the case, Shin suspects someone's lurking in the shadows. He thinks he can teleport them out, but doubts the princess and her peeps will let him bail out using magic that's supposedly lost. He asks Schnee if she can handle things, and she says she can. He tells her to meet them at Valmer. Schnee lets Tira know Shin's fine, and tells her they need to rush to the palace for some urgent business. On their way to the palace, Schnee tells Tira that Shin's in some heavy trouble, with a demon, a scummy monster born of miasma, behind it. She explains that these demons are really bad news, twisting the minds of those around them, and the difference is they get supercharged by miasma. Plus, they can take on the look of other monsters. She ups the ante by saying the more human-like a demon is, the more powerful and cunning they are. So, she's thinking it's probably a higher-end demon, like a count class, maybe level 300 at the lowest, and 400 at the max, because it was able to control a guy. Tira freaks out, feeling she's way outmatched, but Schnee reassures her that they're just there to watch today, so she shouldn't sweat it. Once they reach a secure spot near the castle, Schnee casts a concealment spell called Hiding so they won't be spotted. She grabs Tira, telling her to hang on tight because they're about to take a quick leap over the tall fence and into the castle. Tira's shaking in her boots, way nervous about walking in like this, even though they're using magic to hide. They dive right into the dungeon where the demon's being held. At the entrance, they find two guards, and Schnee puts them to sleep using sleep magic. She snags the key from them to unlock the dungeon and shows herself to Cardinal Greril. He's totally shocked to see her and asks what she's doing there. She tells him what she's heard, but Cardinal Greril, suffering from a mind control effect, can't remember anything that's happened. No matter how hard he tries, all he gets are fragmented memories. Schnee figures it's because he's under two mind-affecting spells, so she calms him down, telling him the two people who got teleported are safe. Then, she dispels the effect on him, forcing the demon out. And guess what? It turns out to be a multi-eyed demon with regenerating hands called Magnumuk, level 423. Schnee can tell he's smart because he has a name. The ugly demon recognizes her as the blue-eyed, silver-haired high elf who keeps messing with their plans. She tells him it's been 500 years since she's run into one of these demons, the last time being back in the Cataclysm. The demon tries to attack with its regenerating hands, but Schnee slices him down every single time with her sword. He then asks her why she wants to protect Cardinal Greril. She replies that it'd be a total shame to let him die over false accusations. Plus, it would be a disgrace to the Moon Sanctum to let a demon like him run free. The dumb demon knows that the Moon Sanctum is where the High Humans used to be, and they've had their fair share of taking down his kind, but he tries to recruit Schnee, and she flat out refuses. Then he questions why she doesn't have anger or bitterness towards those who abandoned her and rely on her power. Schnee is done with his bragging. He really picked the worst time to try to mess with her. She whips out her blue moon sword and gives his head a promotion to a whole new level of separation. Even as his body and head are falling apart, he tries to throw out some parting words. Schnee struts out of the dungeon with Cardinal Greril, along with Tira, Shimmer, and Yuzuha. They head straight to the king's palace, and everyone's buzzing about how she got into the castle. And the king asks what she's doing there and how she got access to the dungeon. She explains the whole deal with the demons and the mind control spell on Cardinal Greril. The king realizes that the demons, the enemies of humanity written about in the history books, are actually active. The king, queen, and Gadras breathe a sigh of relief when Schnee informs them that the two who were teleported are safe. The king hopes Cardinal Greril can keep acting as their liaison with the church, but he apologizes and vows to work even harder from here on out. Schnee tells him he should control information, because if word gets out about disarray in the castle, it could freak out the people. The king nods in agreement and asks what she'll be doing next. She says she has somewhere to go and walks out of the palace with her crew. Tira, curious about how they'll make it to the walled city of Valmer, since Shin has their wagon, asks Schnee about it. Schnee reassures her not to worry too much. They'll just run there. So, Schnee and Tira bolt out of the castle and head to the walled city of Valmer on foot. Tira's keeping her voice loud as her master picks up the speed, even though she's sitting on Shimmer's back. Meanwhile, useless Shin is asking Rion what she knows about the Pure Lands. Rion explains that the Pure Lands are cities that fell during the Disc of Prosperity event, rumored to take some chosen ones to take down the monsters that show up there. Clueless Shin points out that they're gonna need a weapon, and Rion mentions she's thankful she was teleported with the box Skullface sword. Rion then asks Ridiculous Shin what he plans to use as a weapon for defense, and this fool smiles with his eyes closed, like a wet puppy trying to scratch an itch, while secretly thinking he can't let the princess know how powerful he really is yet. He adds that it might be a struggle for him to get out of the Pure Land. The two lost idiots are wandering around the Pure Land when Rion mentions a little door that's rumored to be the exit and entrance of a new gate. Shin suggests they look for the door instead of just wandering around cleansing the place of monsters. Then he spots a wall and asks Rion if she's okay with climbing it. Without waiting for an answer, he jumps into the air but just ends up falling right back to the base of the wall. Dimwit Shin tries again to leap over it, but it's the same result. He asks Rion what she thinks went wrong, and she tells him that after he jumped up, he vanished above the wall and reappeared on the ground. Shin thinks this teleporting must have something to do with why he keeps falling. Shin claims he knows what's causing the disturbance. He leads Rioni deeper into the Pure Land, and they come across a magic ball of light. Stupid Shin smirks, realizing that this magic light means the entire city is actually a dungeon. Rion, shocked at her clueless partner's words, exclaims she's never heard of a city turning into a dungeon. Shin explains that this dungeon works differently from the standard ones she knows. They can only find the exit by following specific routes. Rion, clever as ever, points out that the reason Shin can't fly over the fence or take a shortcut is that the route sends anyone who strays right back to where they started. With his usual dumb grin, Shin adds that they have to follow the magic light balls, avoid traps, and beat up monsters to escape the dungeon. Rion gives her not-so-useless partner a smile and thanks him for being her teleported buddy. Shin returns the gratitude, and Rion blushes like a dork. Before taking charge, Rion tells Shin to let her know if he sees anything strange. Shin announces that the magic light ball will teleport them to a new spot, and he volunteers to check it out first and come back to let her know if it's safe. He touches the magic light ball, teleports out, and then zips back right on schedule. He tells Rion that the new area is safe and not far from where they are. Rion apologizes for making him act like a lab rat, but Shin insists he chose to go because he knows he can escape whatever's on the other side without a problem. He flashes his usual useless grin, thinking he can easily take out any monsters in the game world if no one's watching. Rion promises to repay him for his kindness, and the two clueless fools teleport through the magic light ball together. Shin checks the area and announces that there's a monster lurking around. They both take off towards the monster to take it down. When they finally face it, Rion asks Shin what the nasty monster actually is. Shin explains that it's a ghost-type monster known as a Gilly Ways that uses earth and wind magic. He warns her that the monster's moves are all over the place and totally unpredictable. The Gilly leaps into the air and unleashes a dust tornado magic on its attackers. Rion is all hyped up, saying how awesome the monsters of the Pure Land are. Shin tells the princess not to worry. He'll handle the monster's spells while she just needs to land a hit on the Gilly. With a fierce zigzag slash, Shin takes the monster down, and Rion dives in, yelling as she slices the Gilly in two. Shin grins and lands the finishing blow. Rion, with a smile, asks how they took the monster out in just 3 3 moves. Shin explains that the skill-face sword she's using has light magic, which is a weak spot for some monsters. Riona, excited, asks him what kind of sword he's wielding, and Shin casually tells her it's called Kakura. After some playful teasing about his secret sword, those two goofballs stroll ahead. Rion asks Shin how many monsters he can sense with his magic, or as he calls it, his invisible game setting. He says he can feel 20 monsters nearby, but he warns her that they shouldn't get too comfy since monsters usually stick to their territory in the dungeon. They pass through another magic light ball and get confronted by a high-level slime monster. Rion brushes off Shin's warnings and takes to the sky, swinging her new sword. The slime surprises her by avoiding her attack and pins her down with its gooey mass, even starting to melt her clothes, but Shin rushes in and obliterates the slime. He looks kind of foolish, joking about teaming up with the slime to take it out together. Rion smirks, pointing out how chill Shin is talking to her now compared to their first meeting. And Shin looks away, trying to dodge her gaze. She asks him why he's so awkward, and he sheepishly brings up how most of her clothes are melted away. Rion squeals and hides. Shin offers her his jacket, shivering a bit himself. She mentions he has a ton of clothes, and Shin admits he got most of them as gifts with tools. As they patrol the dungeon, Shin asks Rion if she can use magic. She replies that they rarely use magic to fight. He tells Schnee about his plan to teach Rion how to cast spells. After their lessons, the duo comes across an egg-shaped monster. Shin points out that the dungeon seems to be kicking them out. The monster egg hatches and turns into a huge, nasty griffin who blasts a freezing energy wave at them. Shin swoops in and grabs Rion, flying out just in time to dodge the blast. Once they're safe, Rione asks him to put her down and how they're going to deal with this monster. Shin tells her to strike from behind while he distracts it. Rion chuckles, wondering if her clueless partner can actually pull that off. He assures her that he might get hit, but he'll handle it. Shin takes off, running around to grab the griffin's attention, tossing finger blades at it. The monster roars, and Rion sees her opening. She jumps up and starts hacking at it. The griffin slaps her with its wing, and she's shocked at its strength. Shin calls her attention back and excitedly tells her the griffin is defeated. But wait, the monster suddenly regenerates. Shin insists. They totally took it out, but Rion points out it's back at full strength. The griffin screams and chills them with an icy breath, sending them both running for their lives. Rion asks what their plan is to defeat it, and after some thought, Shin comes up with an idea. Rion exclaims when Shin asks her to find the gate-opening device, but he brushes her off, saying he'll slow the monster down while she checks it out. When Rion wonders why she should deal with the opening mechanism, Shin explains that the monster's fast regeneration must be due to some magic spell linked to it. She adds that if they can open the gate, it could immobilize the griffin for a bit, giving them a chance to escape. Shin, with a goofy grin, muses that monsters often like to show off and laugh. So, he flies high into the air, feeling a little guilty for leaving Rion behind. He decides it doesn't matter about the spell. With Rion out of the picture, he unleashes all his power, taking down the monster in a single slash. The monster's head tries to regenerate, but Shin excitedly shares his plan to use it as a lab rat to test how much power he can unleash. After he destroys the monster for the 30th time, Shin decides to change things up. A white sphere appears in the monster's chest and starts pulling him in. He fires a flame attack, but the griffin absorbs it, wrapping him in a golden light before he breaks free. Realizing the giant has lost its regeneration, Shin takes a moment to stare at it, then slashes its neck, watching it explode into nothing. Rion walks up, confused about the explosion, and asks where the griffin went. Shin casually tells her he blew it up while she was away. Outside the dungeon, Shin tells Rion they're meeting up with one of his buddies in the next town. Schnee gets the message that he'll be camping with the princess, and she tells Tira and the mythical animals to get ready. Later that night, as they set up camp, Shin offers to take first watch and pours Rion some tea. She asks how he's so prepared, almost like he planned for a night out. Shin reveals he used to travel with an item box. Rion admires him, closing the gap between them. She tries to tease him into joining the army, but he declines. Rion says it's refreshing to meet someone who talks straight and has a fun chat. Shin asks about her family ties, and she admits they're not great. He says he's always open for a good chat, but then notices Rion has snuggled into his arms. And the next morning, a whole battalion of Skull faces heads towards the next town where they're supposed to meet Schnee and the crew. Rion wonders why a giant horde of monsters is moving to Valmar. She says it's like a flood. Shin looks confused and asks what that means. Rion explains that a flood happens when the magic stuff from the Pure Land overflows, transforming into a ton of monsters. She mentions that Mist Garuda protects the area, and Valmar is the only safe spot around the mist. She goes on to say Valmar is heavily fortified to keep magic floods at bay. Rion mentions that there are strong heroes in Valmar, but even they take heavy hits. Looking up with disgust, she continues that against a major flood, Valmar might not have a chance. Shin, thinking out loud, decides to ask Schnee to hurry to Valmar. He foolishly points out they still have time before before the monsters arrive and tells Rion they need to join the Valmer army. At Valmer, Rion asks Shin how long it'll take for the horde of monsters to reach the town. Shin says it should only be a few days before they're knocking on Valmer's door. Rion excuses herself to meet with the local lord and tells Shin to report to the town's adventurers guild. Like the clueless goof he is, Shin asks what comes next, and Rion explains that the guild and army are going to be key for dealing with a huge invasion, plus the chosen ones will be gathering. At the guild, our buddy Shin links up with the guildmaster and spills the tea about the flood of monsters headed straight for Valmer. The guildmaster raises an eyebrow, saying Shin's making it sound like he actually saw this flood with his own eyes. Shin insists he spotted a whole load of nasty monsters stomping their way toward Valmer near the Pure Land. The guildmaster says if what Shin's saying is legit, they'll start getting ready. Shin whips out his Moon Sanctum introduction card, like a boss, to show he's not messing around. He tells the guildmaster to check in with the local lord if he's still not buying it, adding that his partner is already chatting with the lord. The guildmaster reassures him he trusts what he's saying, before announcing they're going to declare a state of emergency. He mentions if Shin's buddies with the lord, the army will get moving fast. They'll start evacuating citizens as soon as they hear back from above. The guildmaster turns to his assistant, telling her to contact every guild representative. Once the assistant steps out, the guildmaster turns to Shin and asks what he wants to do. Goofy Shin volunteers to stick around and help the town fight off the monsters, because he's just that kind of guy, right? The guildmaster thanks him but mentions they're short on arms. Shin suddenly zones out thinking about a signboard in town. Schnee hits him up to let him know she's almost at Valmer. He tells her to let the guildmaster know she wants to join the fight against the flood. Shin asks Schnee about that signboard he had been daydreaming about, but Schnee's like, no clue what you're talking about. Then, Shin bumps into a short blonde elf he recognizes as Beret. Beret lights up when he sees Shin and freaks out a bit over meeting him. Shin admits he never thought he'd run into a friend's supporting character from the game. Over tea at a cafe, Beret asks if Shin plans to join the Valmer army to battle the flood. Slow and a little self-righteous, Shin confirms he does, adding he just finished chatting with the guildmaster. Beret questions why Shin didn't wipe out the flood right when he found it, and Shin explains he was with the second princess of Baerlicht at the time, and he can't use full power with her watching. Beret smiles and jokes that he can totally see a princess proposing to him. Shin laughs awkwardly, bragging that the second princess is super into him, hence his need to handle the flood without going all out. Beret offers to help whenever Shin needs it, but then Shin gets a sudden brainwave. He asks Beret about the signboard he was gazing at in the town square. Beret tells him it belongs to a shop owned by Shin's old pal, Hibinako. Shin's surprised and asks if Hibinako still exists in the game world. Beret mentions a few of Shin's friends who are in Valmer. He adds that they're out of the city on business but are doing well. Shin thought they were goners from the death game, but Beret jokes not to be shocked because he has a list of players still kicking around. After showing the list to Shin, he sees that every player listed has crossed paths with him somehow. Beret hands over another list and tells him it's a list of player killers. Shin looks it over and remembers how those player killers took down a ton of his friends during the death game. Beret mentions that when players first popped up in this world, Schnee was the one who pushed to look for those player killers as soon as possible. Shin admits Schnee never brought up other players before. Beret calls her not mentioning the players and killers a betrayal. Shin chuckles, being the hypocritical guy he is, while Beret points out that supporting characters should not withhold crucial info from the main dude. He insists Schnee is his follower, but she should face consequences for keeping secrets. Shin firmly says Schnee would never betray him, but then flashes back to when Schnee played dumb about the signboard. Beret, contradicting himself, says that knowing Schnee, she'd never hurt Shin by hiding stuff. Too late, though the seeds of doubt are planted. Shin agrees out loud that Schnee would never betray him. Beret mentions he has to start prepping for the flood. When Shin asks if Beret plans to fight with the army, Beret shakes his head, saying Valmer is safe with Shin around. While strolling through town, Shin lets Schnee know that after researching floods, he found out a powerful individual has shown up with lower-level hordes a few times. He points out that the bigger the flood, the higher the chance they're around. Out of nowhere, Yuzuha hugs Shin, and he asks Tira where Schnee is. The next day, Tira asks her master where she's off to, and she replies she needs to meet up with the chosen ones at the Lord's castle. Shin points out Schnee returned in the middle of the night, so he didn't get to ask her about player killers and other players. He recalls Beret calling Schnee a betrayer. The Lord of Valmer greets Shin and introduces him to his board of officials. The Lord lays down the game plan for their battle, and Tira feels bad for the knights under Schnee. After waiting and waiting, none of the monsters show, so the folks regroup to figure things out. Schnee pipes up, saying she's seen situations where floods just vanish like that. She adds that after disappearing, the monsters suddenly pop up and attack the town, and Shin realizes this is something that happens in the game. With that, Schnee opens her eyes wide and adds that there might be a super powerful individual leading this major flood, aka the event boss. On their way to the Moon Sanctum, Shin asks Schnee if she cast any big spells during guild battles while he was gone. Schnee shakes her head, saying she usually handles stuff with standard area of effect spells. In the Moon Sanctum, Shin forges a massive bow for Tira. As the troops wait for the flood, Schnee tells Shin she wants to chat after the fight. The monsters finally make their move toward Valmer, and Schnee blasts them with a huge blue spell. spell. Tira and Yuzuha hype her up, and Rion orders the soldiers to attack. Shin warns that this isn't your everyday monster flood, and asks Schnee to do her blue light spell again, but she tells him through their connection that she can't keep creating large-scale attacks like that. Shin leaps into the air, swinging his fire sword. The surrounding monsters go up in flames when they touch Shin's fire. Just as Rion is about to lead the army in, Tira fires an arrow that hits the heart of the monster horde and goes boom. Rion can't help but smirk at Tira's excitement and dives into a line of monsters. Suddenly, a big monster takes a swing at Rion. Tira tries to save her, but whoa, she's already drained a ton of mana from that one shot. Seriously, just one shot took her down? What kind of weak warrior is she? Yuzuha tries to talk Tira out of shooting again, but Tira insists she has to help Rion. Just in time, Wilhelm swoops in to save Rioni. Tira recognizes him, and Laicia pops up behind her, offering to refill Tira's mana. Rioni teams up with Wilhelm to take down that massive monster. She thanks him for the save, then asks why he's in Valmer. Wilhelm explains that the guild got a request for help, and he's got a flashback of Marie pleading with him to save Shin from the monsters before he smirks. Shin's decked out in full body armor, and he absolutely wrecks a monster, sending it crashing to the ground like it's nothing. The guards around him are all like, "Who the heck is this guy?" Shin tells them to just call him Red, and suggests they should scram so he can go all out with his powers. The guards freak out and run away, and that's when Shin activates his cursed axe. He starts slicing through tons of monsters and spots the event boss. This demon then hits the soldiers with a mind-blowing spell, but Shin's not just gonna stand around. He maxes out his attributes and leaps into the air, smashing the demon down with one epic swing of his cursed axe. Oblivious Schnee clumsily tells her clueless master that all the monsters are toast, and the townsfolk are asking about 0 casualties. After the battle, Wilhelm and Lacia bounce, but Shin and his crew are stuck for a victory party. During the celebration, Rion calls out to Shin, and Schnee starts prodding her master if he and Rion have had any moments. Shin quickly shuts that down, acting all nervous around Rion, which makes Schnee storm off in a fit of jealousy. What a bunch of losers. So, Shin catches up with Schnee. She's like, "Sorry for bailing on you, you idiot," and he asks if she's feeling jealous. She admits she is. Then, Schnee brings up whether Beret told him about the players and those player killers, and Shin nods. She instantly feels bad for not filling him in, worrying that if he knew about other players, he'd turn back into the old Shin. She starts crying, saying she doesn't know how to get back to her old self and just wants to be Shin's rock. Shin pulls her in for a surprise hug, saying he would have felt the same way in her shoes. He confesses that after beating the game boss and coming back, he felt super lonely until that day they reunited, and he realized Schnee remembered him. He tells her he's not mad and asks her to promise never to hide stuff from him again. Then, out of nowhere, Schnee asks if he still loves Mariano, and he admits he does, but she just brushes aside his answer and kisses him. Looking deep into his eyes, she tells him she won't give up her love for him and that she'll keep loving him even when he finds his way back to his world. Schnee walks back to the party, and the crew has a good time for the rest of the night. The next morning, Shin and the girls head out from Valmer, off to the next town.